I wanted to create a space where it felt like you were going to your friends for coffee, and there you knew you could share your stories honestly, listen with intention, and within that connection, we would learn and we would grow together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, and thank you again for joining me. I know it's been a minute, and actually, that's kind of what made me arrive at this episode, actually. Trying to figure out sort of the best way to come up with the next episode, and I had a whole bunch of ideas. And again, I always get feedback from you guys, and I always get questions, which I absolutely really love and really appreciate. And sort of in the midst of trying to think of or come up with my next episode, I just couldn't get it together. I just couldn't put things together. Nothing felt right. Schedules kept kind of conflicting. And then it kind of hit me at that moment where all the questions and feedback that I've gotten through social media and through our audience and through the website that we have, I thought, how about I turn the spotlight on myself and I actually take the time to answer some of the questions that you guys have sent in. So flipping the switch a little bit and putting myself in the hot seat. And I'm going to take this episode to sort of respond to some of the questions that you guys have sent in. A little nervous, not gonna lie, but I thought it was time. And for those that do follow this show, I try to be as authentic and honest always, really, and I'm pretty open to share the struggles and challenges and triumphs and joys that I've experienced in my life and what I've been blessed to have in my life. But I thought it was time to just get real personal, get right into it. So here we go. One question that I've got several times actually is how it felt once I got my adult ADHD diagnosis. And I get that question often, and it's a great question actually. And I've mentioned it before in the show, but it was very much a mixed bag because there was a relief, very similar to that of my husband's, where you get the diagnosis and you feel like you're in front of someone and you get it, they say it, you check all the boxes of things that they're saying. And I just got emotional when our psychiatrist said it. And I felt like absolutely it clicked, right? Like there was just that relief, that moment that I know a lot of people can relate and attest to, where you feel seen and you feel, oh my God, that's it. Like that makes sense, right? Like you feel seen and sort of this like weight lifted off of your shoulders in a very almost undescribable way. So there's that, but not too long after that, it was accompanied by this weird feeling of, maybe I'm not so special, if that makes sense. Because for so long, we always feel a little different and we always feel like we're outside of the circle at times. I think everyone can kind of relate to that. But us ADHDers, we always feel like in some weird way we are trying so hard to fit a circle into a square kind of thing, right? Or is it the other way around, a square into a circle? And it's kind of like as I got older, I started to really come to appreciate some of the unique qualities that make me me. So then when I got the diagnosis, while feeling relieved, I also felt a little bit disappointed that it's like, wow, here I am thinking I'm so different and I'm so special when really I'm actually textbook in so many ways of this diagnosis. And it's taken time, and I think it's still an ongoing process to really understand that actually it's kind of both, that we are different and we are authentic, and I'm authentic in what makes me me. And I definitely have more awareness of myself. I have a lot more understanding and grace when it comes to figuring out my own triggers, knowing when it's time to sort of disconnect, what I need to do to recharge, what I know I take on, because sometimes I take on so much at once, and I know what that does to my own energy level and my own burnout barometer, if that makes sense. So overall, I mean, the diagnosis has truly been a blessing and created that self-awareness and that grace that I mentioned is very much needed. But it was definitely mixed emotion, and it's still something that I think I'm sorting through. There's the diagnoses, there's the relief, but then there's my own authenticity and sort of where I find myself within those two lines. Another question that I've received a few times was actually right after my episode with the ADHD mama. It was such a great episode, and I walked away with so much understanding. But the question that I was getting a lot was, how has my ADHD diagnosis impacted my parenting? And oh, such a good question and such a big one. And it's impacted it a lot. And I'm not going to lie and sit here and say that it's all cotton candy and rainbows, because it's really not. And despite all the awareness and understanding that I understand, and Lord knows can only hope to continue to learn and understand as my kids enter different stages and phases in life, it's still very hard. And with myself trying as hard as I can to understand my own triggers, but also get in front of them, right? So I can say that I understand all my own triggers all I want, and sound and noise I've come to understand is a big one for me. Just as an example, so a lot of loud noise all at once, I have a really hard time with. So if the TV is too loud and the kids are screaming and there's so much going on in the kitchen and there's a lot of static in the background, like I have really come to understand that there's an irritation where like my body physically reacts and I cringe, and I have to get out of the room sometimes. Now, when you have littles, of course, they don't necessarily understand that, or they're not able to self-regulate. They rely on us for sort of that regulation. Well, when you're struggling with the ability to regulate an environment, it can be very, very difficult. So trying to stay ahead of my own triggers and come to a place of, okay, this is happening. How am I going to deal with that proactively versus reactively is something challenging in the moment. And what I've actually really tried to do is, instead of walking away, although at times that is necessary to try and reset myself and go back in and re-engage, what I've sometimes tried to do is actually, as my kids get older, have those conversations. So I will look at my son or my daughter and I would say, listen, mommy's having a really hard time with the amount of noise that's happening right now. So can we please turn down the TV, or can we just play the quiet game for 5 minutes? Because mommy's really struggling, or mommy's having a really hard time. And I find that they are more receptive and also feel important in sort of a participatory aspect of it, and helping mommy feel better for like 15 minutes and then, or 5 minutes, or whatever the case may be, and then we can put the TV volume back up a little bit, or etc. So I continue to find strategies and work in ways where I understand myself, but I'm also communicating and articulating with my children so that they understand that it is okay to feel how you feel, but it is all about how you find your solutions and you find ways to be productive and genuine with others as well as yourself in managing situations and environments that sometimes we can control and sometimes we can't. Another question that I got a couple of times, and it actually hit home for me, and it's something I've really reflected on and written about and journaled about, was how do you manage your own burnout? Because as ADHDers, we tend to take on multiple things at once, and we very much like to push ourselves to that edge because we find we are the most motivated or focused when we're on, like, when it's crunch time, right? We can balance, or I find I can balance multiple things at once because it's that adrenaline and that push that I actually find to be very motivating. Whereas if I don't have multiple things on the go, I find that I feel less motivated and I'm more sluggish and I'm more lethargic in many ways. But yet when I'm balancing so much, it's like I'm so tired, I can't keep up. What am I doing? So that in between took me a long time to sort of understand. And by no means is this something I've managed well. I'm still doing it, and I'm still taking on multiple projects, and I'm still taking on multiple things in my life. Except now I've come to better understand why I need to, And if it is something that I'm going to do, I want to make sure that the projects I am taking on are serving my greatest self, versus there was a difference between just needing to stay busy to avoid things or people or relationships, or not wanting to dive into things that I knew I had to, versus keeping busy, keeping productive, keeping multiple things on the go because they actually spark me or ignite me. And that is something I'm still working through, but I feel like I have a better understanding of. And growing up for me, I remember I was always told I'm too much. And I always thought, what am I too much of? Am I too much of what? Like, it was something that really, really bothered me because I didn't understand, right? I'm the kind of person that I go all in. I get super excited when I'm super happy. You know it. When I'm super mad, you know it. I have no poker face. But I remember growing up, and that's something people always said to me. I was the loud kid. I was the social kid. My voice was always the loudest in a group or in a crowd. I was the kid that couldn't whisper. No one wanted to tell me secrets when I was in elementary school because you could hear my voice carry across a room. It was always so devastating for me because I couldn't regulate like my own voice, and I was so excited and I was so happy about things, and I got so interested in things, and it carried with me even when I was a teenager. And I remember people were like, "Oh my God, Stephanie, she's the class clown, or she's the funny one, or she's the theatrical one. And she's too much, like it was always that line of I was too much." And that really, really, I really held on to that for a long time because I never understood it. Like, what does it mean that I'm too much? It never felt like it was said in more of a positive way, that it was always felt in a way of which I had to really keep myself smaller so that I wouldn't offend people, or I wouldn't scare people off, or people wanted to be around me or like me or have more friends, like all those types of things that you feel as a teenager anyway, because it's teenagehood and we're awkward beings as it is. But I always had that with me. I always felt like I had to keep myself smaller in order to be included in the circle, if that makes any sense. And I always felt that the circle was something I was always on the outside of. Until as I got older, I really recognized that it's really not about the circle. The circle is something we're all trying to get on the inside of. I was just really not surrounding myself with the right people. The people that would lift me up, that would make me feel that exactly who I was, the way that I was absolutely okay. So it took time where I really had to understand myself, where I tried so hard and so long to have people like me and to try and fit into this imaginary box, when really I never stopped to ask myself, do I even like these people? Like, do I even want to be in that box? Not necessarily, right? So it really did take that awareness, and it really did take time to understand that. And then once I did, other things started clicking. Like, it's okay that I balance multiple things. As a matter of fact, this podcast was a result of that. My teaching career was a result of that. My master's degree was a result of that. Raising a family, starting a family. I've been doing some writing. I just recently finished actually another certification in my life, where I am officially entering the finance industry as well, as a little side hustle that I'm doing, that I'm really, really, really enjoying. So I've really come to understand that I have the ability to juggle multiple things at once, and not many people could say that. And that should be something celebrated or encouraged or supported with those that are closest to me. So it really wasn't about that I was too much. It was that I didn't have enough of the right supports surrounding me to push myself to be the best version of myself and the happiest version of myself in the most balanced and healthy ways. So for those listening, that is something that I would love it as a takeaway for this episode. Hopefully many takeaways, but one takeaway would be, remember that you are never too much for the right people. Another question that I have received from the show is, do you share your diagnosis of ADHD with your students? And in working in education, I absolutely do. I try to share it when the situation arises, but I absolutely do. And I think that's really, really important. I think that students and the younger generation need to see adults that have challenges and struggles and that they are figuring out ways to overcome them. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't, but it's not about the perfection as it is about the progress, about the resiliency of, okay, that didn't work out. We dust ourselves off and we move on to the next thing, figure out what is going to work for us, what is going to be the best strategy for us in our own situation. And I try to be authentic with that as best as I can. I feel as though I've gotten a lot of positive results and feedback with that. Not for every student necessarily, but it is something that overall I have found that sort of authenticity has worked really, really well in trying to build trust and connection. So when a student comes to me with a story, a situation, a challenge that they are experiencing, they know I'm going to listen. They know that I'm going to understand. But also they know that it is not something that they are going to be able to use as an excuse or as a crutch, but actually it is going to be an opportunity to create a solution for themselves in that moment, as well as in future moments and in future situations. So it's not about being under it and staying underneath it and feeling overwhelmed by it, but it's about how can we take this and move forward together? Well, here are some things that have worked for me. What do you think about trying them? Or how can we create or find a solution that is going to work best for yourself? In working with many therapists over the years and finding ones that I've really clicked with, and that's been something that I've had to work on myself, and that's accountability. And sometimes that word I find is very taboo to use in the ADHD world, right? Because we're so nervous that when we say accountability, it's finger pointing, or we don't want to make that person feel bad if it's something that they necessarily cannot control. And that's something that I hope to address in this episode, because really, I think that's where empowerment is. I think when we take accountability, when we give ourselves the opportunity and the space to become more and more self-aware of our own tics and triggers, understanding what is going to work best for us, what are things we need to avoid, when is it a time to reach out and look for supports or ask for help. I think when we start to acknowledge, when we take that accountability and responsibility for ourselves and our actions, that is where I have personally found my empowerment is. So even within relationships, I think that's probably one of the biggest mirrors, right? So when we look at the relationships in our lives and how are they going, what are they reflecting back to us, the faster we can take accountability within those dynamics, the more positive and fulfilling those relationships become. So it is not about blame. It is not about finger pointing. It is about understanding. It is about surrounding ourselves with people that are supportive, that are cheerleaders, period. However, that does not allow an ADHDer like myself free rein to act in any which way we feel like, or if we know that we are very forgetful, or if we know that there are things that we are more absent-minded about. What are we doing to ensure that that does not happen? Because it impacts, the reality is that it impacts the relationships that we have in our lives. It impacts our professional workplaces. It impacts our colleagues, our families, our friends, our partners, our children. So it's not about perfectionism, but it's about accountability and making strides to constantly improve with the grace and security of stumbling along the way without judgment, but picking ourselves back up and continuing forward. So next question that I have received from the audience was, what is, or can you describe the one household chore that is hard for you to accomplish? I will say, there are so many. I don't even know if it's just household. I mean, there are so many things that, if we're not interested in it, we don't really want to. I think ADHD or no ADHD. But one in particular that I always struggle with is putting away laundry. I don't mind doing laundry. That's the weird part, is that I actually don't mind doing it. It's when I have to put it away that I will avoid it like the plague. And we fish clean laundry out of our laundry bins for a long time before it becomes so much of an annoyance that I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And I put it away. And folding socks. Oh, good grief. If I could tell you the conversations, the angry conversations I have in my head while I am folding socks, I hate it. I hate it so much. And again, is it, I can rationalize it. Like, is it a big deal? No. Do I hate it? Yes. Does it sometimes alter my mood when I have to do it? Yes, it does. So yeah, I would have to say putting away laundry is something that is one of those things that I really gear myself up in order to do. Another question that I get asked often is, can you recommend a place of support, or can you recommend a counselor of which is specific for ADHD? The only thing I can say in terms of when, especially if you're in the initial process of seeking supports, what I specifically did is I looked up CADAC. CADAC it's an abbreviation for the Canadian ADHD Awareness Canada. That is where I started. That's where everything sort of shifted when I really realized that the supports that I needed to be ADHD specific. I mean, we had a lot of counselors over the years and they were wonderful. They really were, but it always felt like something wasn't clicking, and it was nothing against the actual person. Like I said, we've worked with some great social workers and psychiatrists over the years, but having a social worker or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, whichever it is you're choosing to work with, having the ADHD background makes the difference. It truly, truly does. It's the equalizer in regards to partners or children. So what I would recommend, you look up CADAC, go onto their website. It is a Canadian-wide website of which you're going to type in your province, your location, and then what it's going to do is once you type that in, it is going to bring up all the centers and supports within your area, and it will get you in touch with different type of centers and doctors that are ADHD specific, age specific, and it's a starting point. And that is exactly what my family did. It's where I started, and then from there everything sort of helped and everything started to open up. And then I started to seek out communities, other parents, other partners, other groups and families of which are ADHD alike, and we were having that commonality. It was the starting point in our own journey where we started to really apply strategies that were more effective and sort of healing and sharing with more of a less judgmental kind of feel. So that is where I would start for anyone. We actually had the founder of CADAC, Heidi Bernhardt. She was my first guest on That's for Company. She helped me start the podcast, if that makes sense. She was my first episode. It was amazing. And we sort of connected over that. And then from there, that feeling, that connection, it's sort of unveiled the rest of the very first ADHD series or topic specific series that I had. And then from there, the rest is kind of history. So for those seeking support, not sure where to look because there's so many supports out there, start with the website CADAC. And then from there, explore. And there's so many great books out there. Like I said, we've had so many great guests on this show. Laura, the ADHD mama. We've had Melissa Orloff, who is so phenomenal in regards to a relationship expert for ADHD. There's so much out there. I would say start at that point, make your way through. And also, I have to say too, understand that there's going to be information, there's going to be people of which you connect with that it might not work out the first try. And that's okay. So like I said, we've had many people we've worked with and we switched around a bit until we found someone that we just clicked with. So that can, I know personally, can be very discouraging at times when you're seeking all these supports and you're having to go through the assessments and you're having to, go through the steps and get all the information together and talk to people, repeat yourself, more than one time, which is really difficult for us. So I know it can be very frustrating in the beginning steps. However, I attest that it is worth it. It is worth everything that you do and all the work that you put in along the way in terms of the outcome. You will be grateful, glad that you did it for yourself as well as those closest to you. You will see it. You will feel the impact of having the right support with you in the journey of the ADHD world. All right, our last question for this run is, can you describe a hyperfixation or obsession that you have or have had in the past? Well, firstly, it's important to say that there have been and are many. That's important to say. But what pops out in my head right away is the show The Office. Now, many of you have watched this show, so clearly you understand how amazing that show was. It was my first binge during the pandemic, actually, our first lockdown, if you will. And yeah, that was the first binge. And then from there, it has never stopped. So I can't tell you how many times I have watched the series through and through. It's a lot. It is what I constantly have in the background in my house, whether I'm cooking or cleaning, like it's in the back. Or like I wake up early in the morning and I have a coffee kind of quietly to myself with the dogs. And like this morning, I watched 2 episodes, for example. I still laugh out loud. Like it will actually cause me to laugh out loud, sometimes by myself, which is perfectly okay, and sometimes with my kids or my family. It is so much so that my children, who may I remind you, are very little. My son, we will be watching other shows, and my son makes reference to The Office. We will be in a store, and there will be like, a department store where there's like an office t-shirt or an office pillow or something like that. And my son points to it and laughs and is like, Mommy, look, and like makes reference to that joke or to that episode. My sister, we go back and forth. Like if we're typing memes or we're making jokes through text, like it's with The Office memes. Like that's just how we communicate. It's very real for me. Like it really is real, and I absolutely love it. It was just such a brilliant show, and it's such a timely thing. Like I've yet to become sick of it. I hope I never do. So that has been the hyperfixation for an obsession for a little while now. That wraps up the Q&A for me for this episode. Thank you so much for those that have taken the time to listen, regardless of where you are and what you're doing, cooking, cleaning, resting, driving. I appreciate you. I appreciate the support over the years. And as I continue to come in and out of this show, and as I hope to do for many years to come, as I take on new ideas and new roles and explore new ventures in my life, I thank you so much for coming along on the journey with me. And I will continue to share and hope that my experiences and my day-to-day life as an ADHDer, as a mom, as a professional, is something that is relatable to other people that are just trying to figure it out, just like me, just trying to keep it together, put it together, make something happen, all while trying to better understand themselves and take more risks, try and figure it all out for those that we care the most about, and create pathways and lifestyles that are a little more genuine and authentic to who we are and who we hope to be. So that's it for me for this one. Everyone have an amazing week. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I cannot wait to chat again soon.